Hello, everybody. Today is October 3rd, Saturday, and I'm extremely excited for a Codex report. So I am your host, the NHF video host, Alex, and today I'm with NHF President Scott Tips and our Codex Delegate. So let's get right to it, Scott. I know it's late where you're at right now, but what is Codex? Help our viewers understand.
Well, Codex Alimentarius is an international organization, a governmental organization that was formed under the auspices of the United Nations through the Food and Agricultural Organization and the World Health Organization. And those two parent bodies created an entity called the Codex Alimentarius Commission, and this was done in 1963. And the actual word Codex Alimentarius is simply Latin for food code. You know, it doesn't mean that this organization deals with drugs or medicines. It doesn't mean that this organization deals with medical devices. It deals uniquely with food and drink, anything that's a consumable into the body. And what it does, and has done since 1963, is create a steady stream of standards, guidelines, and the code of practice for food so it can be sold internationally. And the National Health Federation has been very fortunate to have kind of stumbled into a situation where, by chance, by luck, thanks to God's grace, who knows what, but we got a seat at this table where we can speak out and participate fully in all these Codex meetings, and we've been doing that for 2 decades now. And in fact, the National Health Federation is the only health freedom organization that has this sort of privileged position. So we are there literally speaking for you on such issues as vet drug residues in food, the vitamin and mineral levels in foods, both maximum upper permitted levels and the lower levels, the basic levels, and all sorts of issues, biofortification definitions where they're kind of trying to sneak GM organisms, genetically modified organisms, into foods and not have to disclose them, to aluminum in your food additives. And I have to say on this, Alex, that as you know very well, but maybe your audience doesn't, the NHF went through a dry period when we first started attending Codex meetings. We had one initial victory at Codex and then nothing for years. And if we had given up, we would have missed out on the starting at the 9th to 10th year. We started having victories almost every single year. It was amazing, and it's continued up to the present.
Well, I think you just touched on how NHF fits into Codex.
Maybe I jumped the gun on that. I'm sorry, Alex.
Oh, no, it's great. But yeah, could you, I mean, I guess maybe demystify a little bit how the NHF fits into Codex?
Yeah, I was a bit painting it with broad brushstrokes. So in the Codex process, they have an 8-step process for arriving at these guidelines and standards, and even the codes of practice. There are, of course, there's the Codex staff. There are the member states from literally Albania to Zimbabwe, and all, you know, countries alphabetized in between. And then there's maybe it's a larger group called the International Non-Governmental Organizations, the INGOs. And this is what, and they participate in the meeting. Now, the chairman and the chairwomen call on the countries first, and then after that, they call upon, if they want to speak, they call upon the accredited, Codex accredited INGOs to speak or to participate. And NHF is one of those. There are many, there are 300 plus accredited INGOs, but I would say 95% of them are trade organizations like Monsanto front groups or front groups for Merck, or like the International Grocery Store Alliance and others, the World Research Sugar Organization, Crop Life, which is a front group for Monsanto, Calorie Control Council, which is a front group for aspartame, the aspartame industry, that sort of thing. So we are kind of unique there. Now there's some other consumer organizations, but who are there, like IBFAN, the International Baby Formula Action Network, INCA, Consumers International, the Helen Keller International. And these are good groups, but their focus isn't on health freedom. They're just really interested in rigid controls on technology and food and the like. And they actually see high vitamin levels as just as much a detriment as GMO food. So we dovetail with them on some issues, but part company with them on supplements and vitamin mineral supplements and nutrition, because we have a very different outlook in that regard. So we are there. We get a chance to speak out at the meetings if the chairwoman isn't terribly opposed to NHF, which in some committees they are, and that's pretty much it. We've been doing that for 20 years now, and it's still continuing. I'm in my 20th or 21st year of attending Codex meetings.
And there's a meeting coming up the 12th?
Yes, well, it's a continuation of on October 12th, 2020, there's a continuation of the Codex Alimentarius Commission meeting that started its virtual meeting, first ever, Alex, these virtual meetings, thanks to COVID-19. And
that was just recently, right?
Yes, it was September 24th, September 25th, September 26th, and then it adjourned until October 12th. And then that meeting will adjourn until, that part of the meeting will adjourn until October 19th, when they have the reading of the report and everyone gets a chance to weigh in on what was said or not. So I attended this meeting on behalf of the National Health Federation.
Thank you very much. We all
Thank you. It only ran for 3 hours a day, so it's pretty short, but you know, I credit to the Codex Secretariat, the staff who run the meeting. They ran a tight ship. They did it very well, very professionally. It was easy to get logged into the meeting. It was easy to raise your hand to speak, to be recognized to speak. The chairman was good, but I have to confess, a lot of the initial part of the meeting, first day of the meeting, I didn't have to say a word because it was pretty mundane, reading of some reports from the executive committee, discussion on issues that weren't really of any importance to our membership, that sort of thing. They put out an agenda. They will, the Codex office puts out an agenda that in this case was more honored in the breach than the observance of it. But they put out a document. I don't know if you can see this. Maybe you can see it. Maybe not.
Yep. Nope. We can. I can see that fine. I can.
Yeah.
Adoption.
And it's the agenda, and it has fairly dry. You wouldn't really know what they're going to do from this if you weren't used to Codex meetings as we are. Someone came in here from the planet Mars, or even from the planet America, they wouldn't know that on agenda item 5, what does it mean, final adoption of Codex texts? Or agenda item 6, adoption of Codex texts at step 5. So we may not have enough time in this interview to really get into that. I mean, it really take a while to educate someone on that.
This might be a good opportunity to let viewers know, if they're not already a NHF member, that they can join, and they get this free book that I've had
Yeah.
for 9 years. 9 years I've had
Thank
this.
you. You have.
But for
And
$45, they can get an annual NHF
Mhm.
membership, which includes 4 magazines, winter, spring, summer, fall, of Health Freedom News, which in and of itself is worth.
Yes, they do. And so they get actually quite a lot from that, besides supporting our efforts at Codex and elsewhere. So thank you for mentioning that, Alex. But you are right. In the book, it explains it much more in detail. And also, people can go to our website, www.the, and then our initials, nhf.com. And you can go to the Codex pages, and there are a lot of articles that have accumulated there over the years, which are, well, I'll apologize for being immodest a little bit, but I would consider them much more interesting than the Codex final report, which is very dry, bone dry. And ours are reports on the meetings, usually written by me, but sometimes by others, give a little bit more of the flavor of the give and take at these meetings and how people reacted, what they really said, because in the report they don't like to mention names. They don't like to say, for example, that maybe the USA or Canada or Argentina, was trying to push that drug residues on the American public, or the international public for that matter. So you do get that in our reports of the meetings. So that's.
And then also, may I suggest, it's about a 10-minute video on our website that gets into.
Oh, yes.
I was going to say earlier, you didn't touch on this, but I am aware it's called Harmonization. Is that what the objective is, or what NHF is trying to help?
Well, that's part of it, is to harmonize food standards worldwide. And even the FDA has admitted, as long ago as 1997, maybe even 1995, they admitted that their own goal was to harmonize the food laws, at least those regulated by the FDA, within the United States, to adhere to Codex standards. So that's why the Codex meetings are so incredibly important. I mean, how many people really know about this? How many people attend these meetings? How many people realize the danger that's posed by it? Because you have a lot of bureaucrats. I mean, when I talked about the countries being represented at these Codex meetings, it sounds kind of democratic, right? But it's really not. It's just FDA type bureaucrats, almost always food engineers, or if we're lucky, food engineers, but usually just technocrats who are there and being paid either by salary or by the hour, doesn't matter. But excuse me, but their goal is just sort of push through more regulations. They're regulation happy. And in Codex's case, it's not that regulations are created. Instead, standards and guidelines are created. And just sort of the difference between the two. Guidelines sort of give the general principles about something, like, how did we arrive at, or how will you arrive at determining the maximum levels for vitamin and minerals in supplements and foods? That's what a guideline is. The standards actually give the numbers, the hard numbers. Well, for vitamin B1, you'll have between 1.2 milligrams and 3 milligrams is the maximum, or whatever it is. I'm sorry, I don't recall right offhand what it was for, say, vitamin B3.
Yeah, but I don't think those details are necessary to provide the example. I'm understanding.
Yeah, but just, thank you. That's just the difference between standards and guidelines. But the importance of these, is that then the regulatory bodies in these various member states, that is, i.e. the countries, they then look to those and adopt them, often internally, to fuel and to shape and form their regulations that are the law basically in those particular countries. In fact, some countries, the developing world countries, are so incredibly eager to have these standards because they don't have the staff to create them themselves. They don't have the money or any of that to do it. So they're often adopting the Codex standards before they've been fully adopted by Codex themselves through this 8-step process.
Wow. Well, for another video, I would like to understand this better. Like, who is to be the authority on what is the optimal amount of vitamin C, for daily recommendations, and
Yeah.
I'm really interested.
Well,
But
an interesting thing on this, usually it's the most incompetent states that are most outspoken on it. Australia, for example, they'd be lucky if they could find their butt with bells on it when it comes to supplements and vitamin levels.
God doesn't sugarcoat it.
Yeah, they're really, really antiquated, behind the times, 100 years behind the times. They aren't even 50 years behind the time. They're 100 years behind the times, using old technology, old thoughts, old school. They wanted to lower the vitamin C level, the nutrient reference value for vitamin C, from an already laughable 60 milligrams a day down to 45 milligrams a day. And we fought them on it. We won. By the end of this 3 to 5 year battle.
You say we, NHF fought Australia?
Yeah, NHF won, Australia lost. Now, to be honest, it didn't go up to the 500 milligrams a day that we wanted, which was even then a compromise in our viewpoint, because of course it should be more than that per day. But it was 100 milligrams a day. So instead of it going from 60 to 45, it went from 60 to 100. And a lot of times the reason this is important is if you get a nutrient reference value that says that something is 100% on a label, you don't have to declare what the actual amount is. Or even if you do, a lot of consumers don't care about what the actual amount is. They don't know that 60 milligrams is really laughable. Certainly 45 milligrams is extremely laughable. What they look at, most consumers, is, oh, I'm getting 100% of the RDA, or in this case, the NRV. So let's go party. I matched my level needs for vitamin C today, and it's actually far from the truth. Also, a lot of countries, what they'll do is they will do a multiplication factor on the NRV as their maximum upper limit. So if it's set at a lower level, the nutrient reference value, then that maximum level comes down too. So by fighting for higher levels, we were actually pushing the ceiling up as well. And we got some good allies in the battle there, a few good allies, but it took some time. I mean, the fight started in 2009 and it went to about 2015 or 16 before it was done. We didn't win on every vitamin, we didn't win on every mineral, but we won on many, a significant number. So that was a big difference. At this meeting, that wasn't an issue because that standard has already been adopted. And Codex, by the way, rarely revisits standards once they're passed. So it's really important to get your blows in while it's being discussed. And we aren't shy about speaking. In fact, we're so unshy about it that a lot of times the chairwomen, we notice it's chairwomen more than the chairman, they refuse to call on us to speak, and we have to really get in their faces and insist that we have the right to speak. I mean, it actually even happened at this virtual meeting, in this case, the chairman, but I think in deference to him, he just overlooked that I had raised my hand to speak out at the meeting in support of Russia on an issue of the antimicrobial resistance. That was one of the things that came up. And there was a big divide, and we spoke up in support of Russia's position that and the EU's position, the European Union's position, and Norway and Switzerland and several other countries who were saying that the problem with antimicrobial resistance is a lot of countries, such as the United States, such as Canada, they want to still use these antibiotics and other sort of antimicrobials to use it for growth promotion of animals in particular. And the EU, quite correctly so, and Russia, quite correctly so. And I think Iran as well, believe it or not, all the supposed bad guys in the world were the ones defending us, saying, look, given the threat that antimicrobial resistance represents for global public health, the European Union, for example, strongly believes that new antimicrobial agents should not be granted marketing authorization for growth promotion, and that the use of growth promotion of those antimicrobials that are already authorized should be phased out worldwide. That's essentially what these countries were saying. And Russia was adding in another thing about definitions. But the problem is, and I'm getting a little technical here, is that unless you ask for your remarks at the end of your remarks to be put in the final report, they don't have to do that. And Russia, which had made a very good objection, which we agreed with, hadn't said that. So when I spoke on, was it September 26th, in support of Russia, I kind of gently reminded Russia, and I said that they needed to do that. I said, and the U.S., I mean, the NHF certainly hopes that Russia's comments will be reflected in the report, which was interesting. So the very next time that Russia spoke out, they said, oh, and we want our remarks put in the report. So, you know, sometimes you can do things like this tactically to nudge a country into taking a path that is good for NHF and its members. Now, here's a fun fact that one advantage to this virtual meeting, I kind of like it and I don't like the way they're run, because you miss the human person-to-person contact and all of that, and sort of developing some contacts that can really help NHF and actually help the citizens of that, the residents of those countries as well. But in the virtual meeting, they have the chat box, or chat, what do you call it, chat line. And so you can send a chat privately. I guess it's private, certainly isn't published to everyone. And you can send a private message to any of the people attending. And you know what, at these meetings, they had over 600 people attending the meetings. This is almost unheard of. I think they had one in-person meeting at Codex that had 750. But I don't think it's ever been this big. And of course, having the meeting between 12 noon and 3 p.m. Central European time for Americans, you know, say going to the meeting
6 in the morning
from California, attending the meeting from, well, or we could even say from Florida, where you are. I mean, look at that. There's a, what is it, a 6-hour time zone difference, right? So you're looking at, if it's at 12 noon, then you're looking at 6 a.m. Not too bad for you guys, 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. in the morning. That's decent, decent enough. But in California, they'd be 3 a.m. to 6 a.m. So it's a killer for some of these other people. And you had people ringing in, connecting in from Fiji, from, you know, Japan, from China, Australia, of course, the Marshall Islands, different places, and you could tell it was kind of hard on some of these people.
Wow. Well, earlier, Scott, I just wanted to reflect on how the NHF's slogan is "Your voice for health freedom," and literally
Yes.
that means, you know, almost 8 billion voices. So the National Health Federation is a international organization. That's
It is, yeah. I mean, thank you. Sorry to tread on your words there, but despite the name, it's really an international organization, as you said. And we have members in 21 or 22 different countries now. One of our strongest groups internationally is NHF Sweden, which has, a large membership and is quite active out there and has made a real difference in Sweden and elsewhere. Pardon?
NHF Sweden has a great secretary.
Yes, yeah, Sarabo. And in any event, so there's a lot that goes on, and actually I find it oftentimes we'll even go to these meetings and there will be no consumer organizations there except for us. The meeting on the vet drug residues in food committee, we're the only consumer that's usually in attendance there. The same thing with the pesticide residue committee meetings, although we haven't gone to those the last couple of years, but we were often the only ones there speaking out against Roundup, against glyphosate. Whereas Merck and Dow Chemical and that crowd, they had something like, at the last meeting we attended, 44 delegates there that we could count, let alone the ones embedded in the country delegations, which often happens.
Interesting. Wow. Well, can everybody watching this right now please smash that like button? It's past midnight over there for Scott, and here he is.
Yeah,
Your voice for health freedom. So I'm sure, on behalf of me and everybody watching this, we want you getting great rest and enjoying the rest of your weekend. But thank you so much for providing an update of the latest Codex meeting and the first virtual meeting and the continuation of it on October 12th, and a little intro into what it is. And once again, for those who aren't members, I've had this book for 9 years. It means a lot to me. God actually signed it for me,
Yes, so I did.
You have your own Codex book and get up to date with the latest knowledge of what could be considered one of the biggest issues on our planet. I mean, definitely when it comes to the health freedom.
It really is. It's kind of some people can laugh, but it's kind of the new world order in the making, at least when it comes to food. There are a lot of good intentioned people at Codex. It's not the monolithically evil entity that people make it out to be, some people at least. But it does have some bad players in there, and we're there to help make a difference. And one other way we did, and I wanted to mention this before we go, if you don't mind, Alex, is we got to see, we didn't have to speak up, fortunately, but we got to see that the final nail in the coffin in the biofortification definition was hammered in at this meeting, where they officially, at the highest level, discontinued work on doing a draft definition of biofortification, that word, which would have included under the definition GMO foods, genetically modified organisms, which could have been sold as biofortified. How incredibly misleading is that? And we fought it tooth and nail from the day of its inception to now. And that was a big victory for NHF, the European Union, and some other countries who strongly oppose this.
Posterity, future generations for.
Yes.
Yes. Well, thank you, Scott. Thank you very much.
Okay, my pleasure. And if I'm a little tired, it's, it's only because it's so late here. But thank you for mentioning that.
Yeah, well, thank you for having our back. We really appreciate it. So thanks, Scott.
I'm happy to do it. Okay.
All right.
Talk to you later.
Yeah.
All right.